Today I'm going to talk about loneliness cycle and dissociation cycle, and the path which leads us through these very patterns past the points where they've ended before. And so in trying to become not lonely and trying to connect, and also in basically for salvation, which is the desire for having suffering ended, and for balance, which is a sense of not being our own worst enemy and perpetuating cycles which cause us pain. So I'm focusing on loneliness and dissociation, and here I'm talking about dissociation as getting outside of the body, being disconnected from the body, dissociating. And so honoring and asserting our needs, often which are in denial or we're not connected to or we dissociate from, if not attached to, the sense of the life force needs to run through us, we end up feeling strangled. We end up feeling like, it's like horrible. Even if we don't make that sound, we know the feeling. Excuse me. And so there's a quote from Thessian's quote I will read, which is, "Let us be self-controlled, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet." So I'm going to say here, faith in exploring the needs, like in the heart space, and then the hope of salvation, which is like in other words, the having faith and having hope here, I'm bringing in as the hope for the ability to have them integrated comes second from the exploration. So first, breaking out of the old pattern requires faith that there's more. And then faith that there's more, and this comes from being saved from loneliness, being saved from a deep, deep loneliness, or various parts of us that are lonely. And then we can have hope to integrate them by honoring these needs at the right times with obviously self-control. Some of these needs cannot be acted out. They're in contradiction with other higher needs. If every time somebody annoys you at your job and you scream about it, you can't have that job for very long. Even if you're a very high-paid, powerful, revealed, leader who has subordinates, you still cannot maintain if you're not going to honor the bigger needs. So we have to integrate these needs. They have to become entangled in us so that we don't act out every little other need. And this takes hope that, can I get out of the cycle of getting out of my body? For example, in anger, the example I just mentioned, you have to leave your body state in that moment of I'm successful and powerful, and realize I'm not feeling successful and powerful at this moment, and I want to scream at you and I want to change this, and extreme sensitivity or controllingness that is coming out because of anger is not feeling connected to the body, which is breathing in, knowing it's receiving its full portion. And if in that moment your full portion doesn't mean screaming at somebody, that's your full portion. Another time you might have to scream to somebody across the street to get their attention because they're about to fall into a hole. And in that case, you would say you're very connected. You're not having an out-of-body experience. So I'll talk about now those two halves. One about the loneliness and then about the out-of-body experience. But before that, I'll say the path through. So honoring and asserting needs refers to feeling significant, feeling love, which here I'm calling connection, feeling growth, that there's being able to see growth, consistency, and variety. I'm going to call these the 5 basic needs here. And in the Tetragrammaton, the divine name of God's presence in the physical world is Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey. So the Yud is connected to the Hey, and it's like also this chain of life force energy getting concentrated in such a way, and then the final Hey is breathing into this world safety and love, being the emanator. And then the Vav right before that is the birth canal, the sense of whatever it takes to get into the world, whatever it takes to get from that place of smallness into expansion. And then there's the Hey, which is to be able to breathe. And then there's the Yud, which is the flow of life, like you're wearing a crown and you're constantly protected, constantly loved, constantly a princess or a prince, constantly. So as long as you're connected with that constant flow of life, which we turn to the rabbis, the priests, the monks to help us stay in that, but we ourselves have an individual relationship with this, especially the sense of the Yud and the Hey. So the Yud is this constant stream of life force energy, and then the Hey would represent fully breathing it in and letting it go, the relationship with the life force energy as a container for it. And as I said, then there's the birth canal of what are we a container for? Obviously it's coming into us, but then what is our container in the physical world? So from that narrow place of what are we holding becomes what we hold, what is holding us in the world. So if we ignore these needs, we get a sense of feeling strangled, like I described, and that's actually said in the mystics' writings, sacred texts, that the Hey is associated with breath, and it's a level of the soul called Ruach, which is the spirit. In some religions, you'll have the words Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost. It's like this invisible but very real form of energy that doesn't take the shapes of the physical matter that we relate to in the world, including ourselves, this body. It's out of body. It's completely connected to everything. And if we cannot maintain that as our being, the shell of the physical becomes constrictive. We need to be able to breathe the world. We need to be able to breathe with the world, with time, with relationship, with everything. And so the path out of loneliness here, when we feel like cut off in some way from the breath, from the life force, and we may think someone's going to have the key for us. It will last a short time. Maybe they have resources to help us feel better for a few hours. But then the next situation will still cause the same chain reaction if we don't get out of the cycle. So in Torah, the laws, the halacha we call it, the divorce laws are written before the marriage laws, because you got to divorce on every level your past partners before you can see with fresh eyes or be open to love with a new partner. You have to divorce your previous selves before you could connect to your current self. In other words, how I'm bringing in this Yud Hey Vav Hey, you have to divorce your previous gods, whoever you're turned into your higher power, to connect with the true higher power that's always more real than anything that ever came before in the past, the truth. And now I'm going to kind of ask the question, why was I so lonely? Like, what was it that caused me to have the loneliness that I'm talking about? And all of us confronted at various times. And these are the versions to integrate. So I wrote some list of some parts of me that didn't really have ways to connect. I was dissociated from these aspects of myself. I wanted someone else to see them or connect with them. So I wanted someone else to be this. But I was trying to advertise myself as this. And that's the loneliness. This is faithfully exploring these needs. I needed to connect in some ways that I wasn't. And so I was continuously connecting in ways that didn't serve me. So some things I wrote, like the versions to sort of, I'm using the word integrate here, but not to get confused where I said integrating the needs. But what I mean is that there's previous versions of myself I have to face. One of them is my insecurity around having a very small head. Another is being spiritual. I didn't have a lot of outlets for it. Another related to being small-headed is kind of like being kind of a hedonist. So kind of getting like flabby sometimes from overeating, or soft from wanting to be lazy, and then also like enjoying exercising and like wanting to be fit. And so having this like two parts of me. And when I say small-headed, I mean my brain actually, what I mean is that my brain in scans is too big for my head. So my container is not big enough for me. So I didn't know how to connect to people or myself as having more than I could use. in the mind or in the physical brain, or that pressure. Then, of course, being short. I always wanted to consider myself different than my family, who a lot of them are like very squat and, having this, like feeling, I wanted to be lean and tall and thin. And I wouldn't really like accept these versions of myself. My feral nature, I have this like, I don't want to call it feistiness, I want to call it sparkle, because it could be really sweet and spunky, but it could also be kind of out of control and hateful if I am using it like without innocence. And then on the other side of that, my innocence, this extreme naive, sweetness that was trying to be more experienced, that was actually kind of really ignorant, I would say, not knowing, not mainstream, not seasoned, not experienced. And then, of course, feeling like a weirdo and not really, and for a few reasons, because of my interests. For example, like I was such an artist without, but I was also an academic in science. And so I didn't have a lot of great connections really fully marinating and maturing because of this. I loved movies and music, but I also loved yoga and nature, and those two didn't seem to go hand in hand. I wasn't really nourishing. I was watching a lot of movies, but at that time, my nature consisted of going for a walk. It didn't really, it meant getting out of the house. I wasn't really getting enough lake time, trees time, birds time. Of course, showering, on the one side, wanting to be so clean every single day, sometimes even twice a day, wanting that sense of feeling. And I say showering, I mean grooming, everything. I mean so much self-care. But on the other side of it, having so much fun going grocery shopping and wanting to cook a lot and overeating, and then being too tired because I ate too much to wash myself, and kind of this negative cycle. And then, of course, intimacy versus cuddling. On the one side, I wanted to be held so tight and sweet, but I was also like having this strong desire for emotional intimacy, which requires no touch, and then also sexual intimacy, and they were separate. I wasn't able to bring all of me into all of these parts. I wasn't finding my life in these areas. And then, of course, I had these weaknesses. I fell for people who represented my father in some way. And on the one hand, I wanted essentials that I had didn't match the weaknesses in others. So on the one hand, I wanted someone so patient, but I also was like very attracted to intense energy. So I was looking for like a very intense person who would have a big effect on me. But that's kind of the opposite of what patience feels like, which is there's no effect. I could sort of swim and flow and ebb and vibe, and it would be okay. And then, of course, I wanted humor and self-awareness, which somebody who is like very paid attention to their self, and also like maybe had a low enough self-esteem at some points that they developed a way to laugh at themselves. But on the other hand, I was kind of attracted to these gentle giants who never really had to struggle too much, maybe with self-esteem, or with very deep voices who didn't really have to try to fight to be heard and pay too much attention to themselves. They may have been able to ask for something and get it right away. So these idealized people who really couldn't relate to me was what I was attracted to, yet what I really needed was not what I was looking for or even cultivating in myself. So the types of relationships to explore for loneliness are family, friends, self, and romantic. You may find that you could do this with hobbies or work, but it would be definitely related to home, whatever feels like home, and who you would invite in your home, the sanctity of home. So unless you have coworkers you're very close to, or hobbies of people you're very close to, or exercise class people you're very close to who you'd share home space with, it wouldn't be this kind of work for loneliness. So the first step is exploring. The mindset of exploring gives information of how to get out of the pattern. It may seem counterintuitive that if you feel stuck, that you should explore the stuckness, but actually that's the only way out. It's kind of like if you're in a hole and then you start to realize the only way to get out is to look at the walls of the hole, look at the floor of the hole, look at the stuff that's in the hole with you. It's really necessary, and it's not fun always, but basically never fun, but it can be fun, and you learn to develop a different relationship with challenges. So you can expect insights, and that's why I say it can be fun. Eventually you start to see things, these invisible ladders come out in a dark hole that you never knew were there. You help others get out using those same ladders, and then that's just an idea. Skills, broader perspective, and of course this hope and faith that I've been talking about. So issues I've explored and I'm still exploring, and I'm by no means an expert, but I definitely wanted to bring voice to this for people who don't yet have voice for it. Some of the ways that we can tell that we're in a lonely cycle and we should start to explore what it is that we need to connect to in ourselves and where we might have this inability to get out of the pattern is splitting, which is when you love and hate someone. I mentioned a few different ways of the integration process being blocked because there's two sides of you which are not getting needs met and they're in contradiction. PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and it requires a safe environment, accepting, non-judgmental patients, but also very resilient people who can handle outbursts. So this is obviously, again, a type of splitting. This is when we've developed trust and abandonment issues, hypersensitivity, reading into things and projecting intentions, still learning the boundaries and needs I have, not being able to be quiet long enough or quiet enough paying attention to listen better, relying on unreliable people, utilizing drama and rift versus letting drift happen at the end of relationships, wanting to be certain that it's over rather than letting it drift away and knowing new people will come. Kind of burning the bridge for safety. Not knowing how to have platonic male friends as a female, or as a male, not knowing how to have female platonic friends. Having a guard up most of the time. Not knowing how to initiate or maintain healthy, balanced communication and interaction. This can be in any form nowadays. I would say also the internet and phone, not just in person. Not knowing how to express interest in a potential connection. There's a strong fear of rejection and all that goes on to this other person who we've turned into a god. We have to divorce this version of them that could redeem us from our loneliness. It's only going to happen inside. Lashing out when angry. I mentioned this, and I'm about to move into the out-of-body experiences, why we might have them, and then you'll have to think for yourself. You'll have to explore for yourself. Yourself deserves your exploration. Infrequent or nonstop communication style without knowing the proper amount. I struggled with this when I felt anxious. I would text over and over and over and over and over. I still find myself with the desire. Or I'd be texting somebody where it was an inappropriate relationship to be sharing such deep and personal stuff when there's plenty of circles and groups to talk about it in. And that's and then the last one is craving intense reassurance but choosing incapable person or persons. And now I'm going to speak about, there's a lot of theories and functions from many, many different scientists about why we have this dissociation. Why do we break off from ourselves? These various parts of ourselves, as we grow and mature, we learn to incorporate them in their components, and each one is developing separately, but also functions as a whole unit of a being. So why might we have out-of-body experiences? And I'm just going to read the list because you'll have to relate to this, and you'll have to figure out for yourself which parts of you could access and feel embodied, that embodied consciousness, that embodied faith, embodied hope, embodied connection, and embodied experiencing of the world to be embodied. So there's reasons why we have out-of-body experience, and it happens all the time, or out of simply emotional body, or I don't mean just physical body, mental body, like we're not connected to the thoughts that we keep having, parts of us that we are out of. So these are the theories of the functions. One is psychosis. We separate from the body because we are having thoughts that are delusional. And psychotic, which means we're outside of our psyche. We're afraid, we're uncomfortable, we can't handle it. Hysteria, which is a frantic and overwhelming sense of urge that it's not okay and that I'm not okay. Body image. I mentioned a few versions of this for myself, and of course you can relate to it in your own way. Depersonalization, which is the extreme development of a personality that no longer fits, and feeling like no one is real because the personality I show myself to everybody as is not real. Not no one is real, but no relationship is real because I'm not real in any of it. A defense mechanism to deal with threat. I'm not the body, because there's no way. It's a learned helplessness. Imaginal confirmation of the quest for immortality. This is a sense of maybe we're being unsuccessful in many areas of our life, in our opinion, and we just need something that will confirm that we're gonna outlast the areas of failure. A delusory attempt to assure ourselves that we possess a soul and that exists independently of the physical body. This is a way of connecting with the part of us that cannot die, so that we can handle the fear of constantly being exposed to, at any moment, a shock of an end. Being, it's an assurance so that we won't be shocked. Stressful reaction to a painful situation, which could be the loss of a loved one, or the loss of love, loss of an area of life which we associate with love. And there's no area too small. It could be a book club, could be a pen pal. It doesn't matter. Just any area of loss of love. Response to a body image change that is causing threat to the personal identity. Whether it's cutting your hair very short and not knowing who you are anymore, which I have had happen. Whether it's gaining a lot of weight and feeling ugly because you associated yourself as beautiful when you were thin, which I've had happen. Or having tattoos and then feeling like I'm not the body out of regret. And so on. Memory and imagination processes like dreams. So it's actually, you have some of these explanations saying it's to become more of a soul, and some of these saying it's to become less of a soul. Subconscious and dramatizing the subconscious mind dramatizes certain images to give impression that one is in a different physical location. So this is to access the resources that are beyond the here and now. By not connecting with what's here and now is actually a way of regressing, like pulling back into somewhere else. So progressing means I can handle this and learn from it and get whatever I need from this and become more of myself. And regressing means I'm going back to earlier versions of myself, earlier places, or what I imagine another place would be like in the future, but it's really from my past experiences. So this is, so far it's talked also about time and place. So it's about not being present. And finally, a hallucinatory construct relating to subconscious levels of personality. And so this would be a function of, it spoke about delusions and psychosis, but also here it's including hallucination. So it's like a sense of seeing the world differently than you think it should be. So seeing things for the first time, perhaps, that were always there. And it doesn't feel like you're looking out of your own eyes. It doesn't feel like you're the one touching. It doesn't feel like it's you, the you thought you were. So there's a subconscious level of personality that's been there all along, and suddenly, who are you? And it's destabilizing. So we stop relating to the body and the needs. But anyway, I would like to leave off there and wish you a day where you have your needs met. These needs, I'll go through again, are to feel significant, to feel love or connection, to feel growth, variety, and consistency. And to get out of these cycles of loneliness and dissociation. And to find hope and faith and balance and salvation. Thank you.